We thought that in this big inflation problem, we would see these people going back to work because it's like, well, I can make more money now. Well, guess what? But they have to pay more for all those services. They have to pay more for gas. They have to pay more for the childcare. Childcare has gone through the roof. It's doubled in price in the last couple of years. You look at all of these things and saying they may never come back to the workforce.
Today at our studio, we are joined by Jim Cichanski. How are you, Jim?
I am doing well, and thanks for inviting me, Rick.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to getting into this. We've got some great topics today, folks. Jim is an HR genius. He probably wrote the book, but he's got a wonderful history. He's built a wonderful company. I want to hear about that. We want to talk about the Great Resignation. So before we get started, folks, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, make sure you get the notifications every time we drop an episode, and we can get started from here. So, Jim, the question we always ask folks, because, we're really interested in the entrepreneurial experience as well as other things, but we want to hear a little bit about you, about your background. I know you're in the military and you started an amazing company. We want to hear about that.
Right. I mean, interesting, but my military background actually got me thinking about how to set up this company when I started it 22 years ago. So I did a lot of acquisitions and mergers, and mainly to small companies. And as I was flying back from California one day, I took a company down by 50% of their asking price in an acquisition because of the risk in HR. Mm-hmm. And I basically said, well, there's a common theme of these small companies not really having HR professionals and really couldn't afford bringing a high-priced professional into their organization when they only have, 40, 50 employees or so. Mm-hmm. So I drew on a concept of something that I did for 27 years, and that was being in the National Guard. And I ran combat artillery, so I was a combat artillery commander. And then when I didn't do that, they threw me in HR jobs because of my HR background. So the last 4 years, I ran all the human resources for the state of Illinois, both Air and Army, almost 13,000 troops, 4,000 civil service employees, 87 different locations, and I did it part-time.
Part-time. Okay.
So basically, that's exactly how I started Flex HR as fractional HR support to small and medium-sized companies. We still do that today, even though our major division has come out of that, because 14 years ago, we had 2 clients literally ask me in the same week, how about outsourcing everything in HR? Let me be paperless. You all do it all. And wound up doing an ASO model that actually does all the HR outsourcing as well. So that's brings you up almost to the current time, 22 years ago.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, you said an ASO model. I don't know if we're all familiar with that. Can you break that down for us?
Administrative Services Organizations. So you probably heard of PEOs where you got to lease employees to them and the paycheck comes from them, not from your company. Well, literally, we're just a virtual HR department. And we run their payroll, so nobody has to be a keying expert and putting things right in the payroll. We manage all the systems. We manage all of HR. We help all the managers terminate employees, hire employees, all of that kind of stuff. So we do everything HR, but we're outsourced models so that they don't have to worry about compliance. We make sure all the compliance is done.
Wow. No, I think one of the things, that always impressed me, when meeting you was the complexity of HR, and I think as a small business owner, we don't get that, it's just like, oh, I need to hire somebody, go out, find them, et cetera, et cetera. But, I know that we don't have time to dig deep in that, but I mean, give us some of the lay of the land there.
Yeah, I mean, we're in all 50 states. We manage all of the HR components in all 50 states, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Canada. It's tough keeping up with everything today. It's moving fast. Probably around 250 major new laws being in place in the labor area every year. California is going nuts. If you have employees in California, there's 18 different minimum pay ranges in California, which also triggers how much you could pay for an exempt employee and all of that kind of stuff that most people don't understand. Says, well,
Yeah.
the federal law says I could hire somebody as an exempt for $35,568 a year. Well, not so fast. In California, it's based on double the minimum wage times 2080, which in LA County, they just increased from $15 to $16.05 their minimum wage. So that means you must make at least $64,000 in California to be classified as an exempt employee.
Wow.
Things that a lot of people just don't know because these laws just creep in and especially if they aren't based in California, they would never know about these laws.
Yeah. It's just mind boggling. I don't know how you guys do it for one state, nonetheless, the rest of the country. HR truly scares me, and I think that it should.
Right. I mean, we keep up with it. We actually even have a compliance manager on staff just to keep up with all the regulations and the need for clients to meet all the compliance requirements.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially today with a lot of businesses shifting to a remote environment.
Yeah.
Would the process be more complex, or would that simplify a lot of things?
Oh, it's much more complex because we've had a lot of companies allow their people to work from home. But what happened was we had a lot of new clients because of this. Say, wow, we have 450 employees. We allow everybody to work from home. Pretty soon, everybody's working in a different state. And they were paying them out of their corporate state, not the state that they work in, which is the required state for taxes. Yeah. So a lot of people during COVID went home to their parents to live. And they lived in a different state. And then they forgot to tell their company that they moved because, hey, they do all the work on a phone. They didn't even realize they had to go tell their company they moved to a different state. So we have spent a lot of time setting up new states for pay for a lot of our clients.
Wow, that's amazing. That's one of those things that just doesn't, like you said, just doesn't cross our mind.
Right, and the rules around working at home. It's like, okay, if I'm going to allow them to work from home, there's a difference of the employee volunteering to work at home versus I'm going to require you to work at home because I don't have an office for you to come to. So now who pays for the internet? Who pays for the computer equipment? Who pays for the ink? You have to use your personal cell phone. Did you put it in the contingency of employment that you will be required to use your personal cell phone? And we might even ask you to download apps on your phone. If you don't, then you have to pay them for it, especially in California.
Wow.
So those are other little tiny labor laws and IRS laws that a lot of owners of companies, managers don't know about. They're hidden little things that you got to worry about to stay compliant and make sure you're running a great work environment for your employees.
Amazing. So, you talk about compliance, and so I guess the assumption is that non-compliance results in penalties. I mean, what are companies looking at? How does that work?
We get a lot of calls with companies that had an IRS audit or a Department of Labor audit or a 401k IRS audit, and they found themselves into trouble and now they got to fix themselves. But we have seen penalties from the 200,000s to the millions of dollars in penalties. Or if you're not following the rules of your own written 401k plan and you're not doing it, and they catch you not doing it because an irate employee complains that, gee, this isn't happening, they'll audit it, they'll make you shut it down. But when you shut it down, sometimes you have to go give everybody their money back. And it's now the untaxed money becomes taxed. And usually the company is going to say, hey, it was our fault. So we will have to pay for all those costs to make everybody whole. And boy, those could run into the multi-millions of dollars if you don't have the proper people running your plans.
My gosh, I'm more terrified.
I mean, stuff happens. I can't make this stuff up. It actually happens. And, we're a pretty good size consulting firm now. I think a lot of people have identified us as the largest in the Southeast. And we get a lot of calls and they're already in trouble. We like the calls when they say, take this stuff over before we get in trouble.
I don't think we quite understand the magnitude of pain until we're there.
Until it happens. Yep. Or you're not paying an employee right, exempt versus non-exempt, and then that person leaves, and they say, "Hey, this company was paying me as an exempt, and they didn't pay my overtime, and I want my overtime from that company." Well, you would think, okay, give them a couple bucks, but oh no. They'll make you do a self audit for the past 3 years, everyone you did this to and who you might have unclassified or classified wrong, and then pay them all their overtime. And of course, the IRS doesn't listen to you on how much overtime. They ask every employee. When an employee comes and says, oh, I worked an average of 6 to 8 hours a week overtime every week, and they go back and calculate it 3 years back. In California, their state laws say you could go 4 years back. And when you start adding that up, that could be darn close, just 20, 30 employees could wind up being $1 million cost. But then the IRS will look at how flagrant you were at not meeting your obligations of doing things right, wage and hour right. And those penalties and fees could add up to 3 times the amount of just the payment to the employees. So you can have a $500,000 fee that you have to pay back to the employees for overtime, but then your fines come up to $1.5 million, or you're all in at $2 million to fix your problem.
Wow.
Yeah, companies can brand from themselves by something like that.
So our big topic for today, is around the Great Resignation, everything that happened around COVID and all that good stuff. And I want to get your take, on I guess what it is, just to break that down for us, and your thoughts on it.
You had COVID, obviously, it all triggered everything. But as people went home, didn't know if they were had a job or not. And then all of a sudden they learned how to work from home. And then you had a lot of the locations that had essential business that they had to come in. They were splitting shifts. I work with a lot of veterinarian practices, and, it was an essential business. In fact, the veterinarian business took off because everybody was working from home and they bought pets. And they had to have their pet service. So they would shift their people and work like 3 days, and the other half of the people come in 3 days. And they did that so if somebody got COVID in the office and gave it to everybody else, they didn't have to shut down the entire facility. So we did smart things like that at the beginning. And then, we started learning how to do curbside service and all of that stuff so that we'd spread people around these small offices when you take a look at it. But then you started having people return to work. And what happened? They were getting used to working from home, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they didn't want to come back to work. So they started resigning because they found another job that allowed them to work from home.
Mm-hmm.
So we started having that issue. And then the big, great supply and demand issue.
Yes.
We hurried up and went to almost 15% unemployment. We're down in Georgia. We're down to 2.7% unemployment. And there's some locations in Georgia that's below 1% unemployment. And when you look at that supply and demand, what happened? First of all, almost 4 million people in the United States decided, I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm at retirement age. I mean, I had a lot of friends that were teachers with 30, 35 years of service are like, I'm not going to learn a whole new way of teaching kids. And I don't want to see my kids on a tube. I want to see them in person. Yeah. I'm not cut out for this. I'm retiring. Same thing with the police and fire. How many of them had tenure that they could retire? They have pension plans. They said, with this COVID stuff, I'm out of here. So you had 4,000 people literally retire out of the workforce earlier than they expected to leave. Then you had another 4 million people, mainly females. It's interesting, took a look at this class of employees that decided to stay home and quit their jobs because they had to homeschool their kids. Or they had to be there to get the kids onto the computer and be there. And of course, trying to take a kindergartner and a first and second year child and him sit still at a computer is almost impossible. So they had to be home. And then even when the kids started going back to school, what happened? One day they would get a call and say, hey, we're closing down this class because somebody got COVID. So now they have to be home with their kids. So this group of people, we wonder if they're ever going to come back to work. And this is what's happened. So they sat there and figured out, well, wait a minute. I'm going to throw a figure out. I'm making 70 grand a year, but not so fast. By the time I had to pay for childcare, gasoline to go to work, and in Atlanta, nobody works close to home, right? They have a 45-minute trip no matter where they go. I'm paying for extra clothes, makeup, all of this stuff, and my time and effort. And when I'm home, I don't have that dreadful call at 5 o'clock in the afternoon says, hey, I just got called into a meeting. So did I. Well, who's going to pick up our children? So once they were home, they realized a couple things. I'm going to leave the biggest one to last. So they realized by the time they were paying all that extra money, being in a double higher tax bracket, all of that, they were really only bringing maybe $4,000 home cash at the end of the day. But here's the big kicker. Now they realize they got a better lifestyle. And what is the millennials and younger generations all about is this lifestyle thing, right? Yep. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We have more time on the weekends to do things with our children because we're not having to clean the house and go grocery shopping and doing all the other tasks that we had to do after work. And so we're sitting there saying, out of this 4.5 million people, are we going to see maybe 500,000 go back to work and not the rest? And it's holding true. We thought that in this big inflation problem, we would see these people going back to work because it's like, well, I can make more money now. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? But they have to pay more for all those services. They have to pay more for gas. Mm-hmm. They have to pay more for the child care. Child care has gone through the roof. It's doubled in price in the last couple of years.
Wow.
So you look at all of these things and saying they may never come back to the workforce. So that's why we're sitting there saying in the United States, there's 14 million job openings and there's nobody to fill the jobs. The unemployment rates are going, the federal unemployment rate's at what, 3.1 or 2? Georgia's at 2.7. There are some locations like Fargo, North Dakota, that's below 1%. You're sitting there saying there's nobody available for the workforce anymore. And maybe the people that are unemployed are not employable. So it is a perfect storm that happened. I was with a group of owners about a month and a half ago. And that industry hires a lot of people at the $13, $14, $15 an hour range. Mm-hmm. So they're paying $18 to $20 now. So they came and asked me this question, one of the owners in front of the rest, and said, when will we be able to drop this wage back to where it was? I looked to him. I says, let me think one more minute before I answer that. The answer is never. Nobody that's making $19 that used to make $13, they're not going back from 19.
That's right.
That's inflation did. And of course, a lot of people didn't live in the early 80s in companies and saw what happened when inflation was 14 and 15%. Those wages didn't go back down.
Right.
So I asked the follow-up question saying, did you increase the costs to your clients? Let's see a show of hands on that. And literally only 20% of the hands came up saying, I did increase my prices. But the other 20% was still holding on, and they were almost literally losing money. Mm. Because they had to hire people at higher wages. And of course, what happens when you hire people at higher wages? You then got to go pay the current people higher wages or they'll all leave. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they all agreed that they're all going to increase their costs to their clients. But, so we saw that happen in this inflation. Now, What are we seeing recently? We're seeing a lot of holdbacks on hiring people, especially in the big companies. Mm-hmm. I think Microsoft had something around 110,000 openings. They literally froze them all and said, let's see what's happening here. This inflation's going crazy. And of course, it's the bubble effect too, because if they would go out and hire those people, number one, they have more expenses in their company, right? But number two, they have to hire them at a higher price because of the supply and demand issue right now, which means they would have to give everybody else an increase to keep up with the new hires. So there's a lot of big companies now that have frozen a lot of their openings and said, we're waiting. We're going to see what happens in this whole inflation thing. Now luckily we're starting to see the inflation numbers come down a little bit. Mm-hmm. We don't know if that's going to stay. Nobody knows that. It's hard to have a crystal ball and say, do I hire or not? Now I'm seeing small companies still hiring. In fact, I was astonished. One of our clients literally in the last 30 days doubled their headcount. So we're seeing a lot of hiring. I would say in the small company area, we've been seeing a good 10 to 20, 25% even increases in headcount this year. So we're seeing that. I mean, so the economy is good. So, you're all these questions about inflation and all that. But it's quite interesting about this perfect storm that happened and where we're at. And companies now have to totally do recruiting differently than they did in the past.
Yeah. This was going to be my next question. With the supply demand issues, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's what are companies doing successfully, to recruit great talent.
Yeah. First of all, great talent is tough to find. So we're seeing that we're accepting maybe a little lower level talent than we would want to bring into our organizations today, but it's the only available candidate in some cases. Yeah. And it's either hiring somebody that you might have to train up a little more. You would have hoped that they had maybe 3 more years of experience in a specific field. But you're going to sit there and say, we're going to hire the junior candidate and train them up. And let's work with it, because if we didn't, we wouldn't have anybody in our seats to do the jobs. So
does that have anything to do with wages per chance? Is it like they're hiring that junior person or bringing up that junior person instead of, paying that higher wage for that more senior person?
That's very true in many, many cases, because what happens if you hire that more senior person that you expected to hire? You have to pay more wages for them. Yeah. And then what happens? Now you got to give everybody else raises. So, there we go. So so we are starting to see companies manage their inflation by themselves in things like this. We're starting to see them put their market space on and get rid of half of their office space. And some of them are just closing the offices down, saying, hey, work from home from now on. I just helped a merger of 5 or 6 companies together, and they had all these offices. They said, well, you know what? We're going to do a asset purchase instead of a stock purchase, so we could cancel every one of our leases and tell everybody to work from home. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's remarkable.
And they had some, we're talking about 1,600 employees in this group together. And they had some long-term leases, like 10 and 15-year long-term leases that they were able to get out of because the company doesn't exist anymore. So, we did a lot of that kind of stuff too, to change the cost factors of what's costing companies money. Now, that also includes we're learning how to train people that are remote. It was so easy to say, hey, sit next to Rick for 3 weeks and learn his job, and then you could go and do it on your desk. But that doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And working from home sometimes is a little difficult getting a hold of employees because they're on their phone talking to, the clients and all of that. And by the time you get to talk to that person, could be 6 hours later or next day even. And then trying to train, it's like, okay, let's hook into a computer, let's share screens. And that all takes extra time and effort. And the ease of doing it isn't there. It's more clumsy, to do things like that. So we're starting to see a lot of training. New employees are coming on board a little different way. Like, let's videotape this and let's put YouTube tapes on how to do things and train them that way. And then as they start, you give a series of training to them to do. So we're changing the way we get new employees trained in the company today to be productive. But in the recruiting model, as you asked, we almost have to tell every client that's in trouble with finding people to just disregard almost 100% the way they were doing things and change their model. Because of the shortage of people, it's interesting. If you're in a rural area, we recommend highly that you post jobs in the big cities close to you because people want to leave big cities today. They're tired of the COVID stuff. They want to be in fresher environments and not as many people walking the streets and all of that kind of stuff. So we have had huge success there. There's a huge shortage in veterinarians right now. And these rural veterinarian companies, boy, we've been able to pull a ton of people out of those major cities because they were tired of working in the city. And what else is what helped? That's that other thing that I talked about earlier about why they want to move out of the city too. That quality of life.
Yes.
So interesting how that's all bubbled up from, listening to the millennials for years about this lifestyle thing. And then with this perfect storm, it's actually starting to get built in into their environments and their work. And they work at home now and they have a lot more flexibility to get work done. Management's starting to figure out that it could happen. And they could be very productive at home. And in a lot of cases, even more productive working from home instead of hanging around a water cooler. So we sit there and say, and I'll give you a good example of, a veterinarian practice. They had 3 practices, and he couldn't find any vets. He couldn't find vet technicians. He was like, I can't find anybody. And it's like, well, what are you doing in recruiting? And so we listened to the boring old story and we looked at his website and it says, listen, you got to fix your website because any candidate that would go to your website would say, I don't want to work for that place. You got to look modern. You got to look exciting. Your postings are boring. You got to make them exciting. They have to be a sales flyer today, not just this is the job, you could do it, apply. And then other things like, to get veterinarians and get professionals like that, you need to work with colleges and go speak to classes and teach them new theories and all of that. And it was really funny because this owner went and started doing it. He says, I'm going to do it myself. And he went out and we got him set up in a couple of colleges and he started doing this community action work with the colleges. And then he spoke in an auditorium and it had veterinarians and it had technicians, about he said around 80 to 85 students in that. So he handed out a piece of paper and it had one of those scanning devices on it and said, hey, if you're interested in our practices and want more information or what positions you might be able to apply for from now and in future when you get done with school, click here. And the next morning, 44 people went and put all their information in. So it's like, now what do we do with it? Because one, we were looking for getting names of candidates that are in that field, that industry, right? So we wanted to then get enough emails so we could start producing a quarterly newsletter to them. Right. Just saying, hey, this is what's happening. We hired 3 people more. we just brought in these new radiation machines, getting them excited about, that's where I want to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we called these 44 people up and actually had personal conversations, not a recruiting. It was more like, what can we do for you?
Yeah.
What kind of position will you be looking for? When are you going to get your technician certificate? When are you going to get your vet? Have you signed up to do any interns or ships? And would you like to? And would our places be a convenient location for you? And we would get into all of that, and we set up internships for vets. So hopefully what we will do with them is once they're finished with schooling, they're already signed up to come to work for them. Technicians, we've already hired a couple technicians. That way we had a couple of technicians that were in a certified program say, hey, I can't do this anymore. I need a job. And they came as trimmers and assistant technicians, and we're working on figuring out how to pay for their education so that they can go further. So you got to think out of the box today and do things that you didn't do before. Because this problem with supply and demand of people, it's going to be here for a long, long time. This one's not going away. We predicted a shortage of people in the workplace for years. The more we automate things, it seems like the more we need more people. I mean, yes, we're going to see a lot of automation where packages are going to be delivered by drones and all kinds of things like that. It was kind of crazy. I worked with a company 20 years ago that built kiosks, and they were trying to sell these kiosks into Subway, and Subway said, well, people really want to pick out what they want on their sandwich. Well, guess what? You go into a lot of these places now. I know Taco Bell is very hot on it. You go, there's nobody at the front counter. You go to a kiosk, you press in your order. You want extra cheese, double lettuce, no lettuce at all. You identify how you want your taco, and out it comes perfectly designed because you entered everything, and it reminded you of things that you probably forgot about, that, oh, I should have asked for an extra pickle. Yeah. So all of that is there for you now. And yes, that reduces a person at workforce. And we're going to start seeing automation, but we're not going to ever see people never having to show up, especially in essential businesses.
Yeah.
And, and the costs are going up. I hate to see all the enrollment, the renewals are coming up for January 1st, medical plans. I hate to see what the price is going to be. Let me tell you, in the last 2 years, every nurse in the United States has at least received a $30,000 increase. And that reflects in your bills. And insurance companies see these numbers going up, and the actuarials see these costs going up. And then with the costs of like the abortion stuff that's going on and uneasy, these actuarials don't know what to do with that whole program. So what are they going to do? They're going to add 2 or 3% onto that just to increase it for unknowns. So with not only on top of inflation, but everything else that's going on, I hate to see what the renewals are going to look like. The last ones we saw in the last 4 or 5 months, they're pretty high. Probably on average 15% increase. We've seen up to 48, 50% increases. If you have one ill person in a small group, it's going up probably 40%.
Yeah, it's quite a large shift, Jim. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought that you're talking about tactics for client acquisition, like client marketing, but only for recruitment.
Yeah, when we coach companies to rehaul their recruiting structure and all that, we say, okay, if you're going to have 3 people interview this person, maybe 4 or 5 sometimes, who is going to be the designated salesperson? Who's going to sell them on the company? And it's usually good to have somebody doing that that's been there for a while, you know.
Yeah. You gotta,
Johnny's been there for 6 years. He could talk the story. He could talk how much fun it is, what we do for activities, how we get together, how do we get trained, how we're supported right, all the benefits, and they're great, and they do this and they do that for you. Somebody's got to be the salesperson and to really make the candidate feel that, boy, this is the place I want to come to work.
Yeah. Really goes to show that you got to be more strategic about it.
Yeah. And let's face it, candidates applying for a job, they're nervous a little bit, and they hate to ask those tough questions like, gee, what are the benefits? But they really want to know, you know?
Yeah.
Gee, when you say I could work from home, do you really mean that, or do they call the employees in a moment's notice and say you got to be here today? And how many times a week does that happen, or a month? So having an employee state that stuff without the candidate having to ask, they're more comfortable saying, no, we're a true work from home. We only get together once a month, and we do that for a luncheon. And so everybody can see each other and talk to each other, get some business done, but it's mainly fun. And then you go home. We make sure you go home before rush hour, so you don't have to even live through rush hour. That's important to a candidate to hear that stuff and say, wow, yeah, I want to be part of this group. This is fun, and they worry about you. Other things that we have forgotten to use because of the so low of unemployment. A lot of the churches used to have unemployment groups to help their members with employment. And with such a low unemployment rate, those things have fizzled a little bit, but they're still there. Yeah. But maybe they don't meet all the time. But going and posting at the local churches openings, it goes a long way, because usually those are people that are volunteers at churches, and they get a posting in saying, hey, we have a job that's, three blocks away from the church and all that kind of stuff. They'll put it on the bulletin board, and a person's going to read it and say, hey, I'm going to go apply for this job. It's it's connected with the church, as well as it's close to my home. Other things for, the minimum wage earner, things like that. Go to the apartment complexes around your office and put by the mailbox, we are hiring. And unbelievable how many people will grab that phone number and call up and say, well, that place is right around the corner from here. I can walk to work. So those little tactics, they work. I mean, they actually work. And we used to do that a gazillion years ago. We forgot how to do all that. And we're now starting to do that, and it's paying dividend. Now, the other thing that a lot of companies are doing, you probably heard about it, you read about it, these sign-in bonuses. They are giving sign-in bonuses to employees to make it a little more comfortable to leave their old job. I mean, they might sit there and say, well, I might miss a week's pay between this job and that job, or something like that. Well, we're giving a $2,000 sign-in bonus. So it's like, oh, okay, that fixes that, right? So, there's all kinds of little tricks to use. Everybody asks me where's the best place to post a job today. Right now, today, Monster's not working. Careers is not working. Indeed seems to be the hottest posting site now for both employees and employers. There's a product called Juno 360, JUNO 360. It's for hourly employees, but what a neat concept. So as a candidate, you go to your phone and you pull up the app and you identify, this is how much I make an hour. I make $14.50 an hour. This is my job. These are the jobs I had. This is what I'm interested in doing. This is my address. This is the address of where I'm working now. Da 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 da. And you'll be driving to work, and you'll get a little jingle on your phone, and it's like you just passed a job opportunity. It pays $3 more an hour. You would make $4,000 more a year. You would save $1,300 a year on gas costs. Would you like to apply? Press the button. An interview set up. Yeah. And that company has really gone crazy over the last year or two. It was a startup maybe 3 years ago, and it's doing very well. And they got millions of people now using the app, and they're building it in every city. They started it in Atlanta, but they got most of the major cities now tied into it.
Jim, thanks so much for being on the show. This has been amazing. Great learning opportunity, great information. Now, you had something, an offer for our listeners. Do you want to share that really quickly?
I would love to. For the next 2 months, any company that would like to, we will give 1 hour of phone HR consulting to them. So just give us a call or email us. We can set up a call, and that would be great.
Awesome. Yeah. And folks, we'll put that information in the show notes so that you can reach out to Jim directly or reach out to the company and get your free consultation. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome.
All
right, folks. Thank you so much for watching another episode or listening to another episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff. Jim, thanks again for being a great guest. Hazel, great to see you as always. Thanks for co-hosting with me. And we'll make this happen. We'll see you next time, everyone.
Bye now.
Thanks for watching another episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff. Please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when the next episode is going to drop. Don't forget, we're on podcasts as well, so you can catch us on your favorite podcasting platforms. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff.